Well, my name is Paul Stamets. I'm a specialist in psilocybin mushrooms and medicinal mushrooms. I've been studying psilocybin mushrooms since I was 14 years of age. Um, I am a student of nature, and psilocybin has opened my access to, I think, a deeper intelligence in nature. And what I've been happy to rediscover, because I didn't discover this, is that people all over the world have been using psilocybin mushrooms. We're in a very cold region of Switzerland, and psilocybin mushrooms were used here. And Germanic traditions also have been using magic mushrooms for a long time. In fact, the Bavarian Beer Act, I think in 1516, outlawed mushrooms in beer because the Orthodox Catholic Christians, I think, were trying to suppress pagan ritual. And when Orthodox religions come into an indigenous culture, they unfortunately have a habit of trying to create barricades to spiritual consciousness by creating doors that are locked unless you have access through gatekeepers. The beautiful thing about psychedelics, and including ayahuasca and psilocybin, is that you have direct access to the divine. You don't have to pay tithing. You don't have a pope. You don't have a church that only will allow you to enter if you conform to their rules of access, which oftentimes is monetized. Orthodox religions have become businesses, frankly. That's what it is. They monetize spirituality at our expense. And the beauty of psilocybin and psychedelics and tryptamines is that we don't need a gatekeeper. We are, in fact, part of one giant consciousness. So, tryptamines and serotonin is a tryptamine. I'm using serotonin. You're using serotonin. Everyone is thinking and seeing because the serotonin is basically like the contact fluid between neurons in the synapses. So at these synaptic junctions, serotonin is our operating tryptamine. But in fact, dimethyltryptamine is a form or very similar to serotonin. Serotonin is a tryptamine, psilocybin is a tryptamine, obviously DMT is a tryptamine. But something really extraordinary has happened, and almost nobody has made this connection, or maybe they have, but I haven't heard it. And so in 2016, NASA sent a probe to an asteroid called Bennu. Bennu formed 4.6 billion years ago. Now, the Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. So that means this asteroid formed 100 million years before the Earth formed. Think about this. The first organism that we know of is Luca, the last universal common ancestor. And Luca appeared 4.3 billion years ago. Okay, so look at the math. 4.3 billion years ago, the first organism on the planet from which we are descended. And then 4.5 billion years ago, it preceded Luca by 200 million years. 100 million years earlier, this asteroid, which is presently outside of the orbit of Saturn, when the NASA probe came back in 2023, and they just published this in November of 2025, they took soil samples, basically asteroid dirt, dust, brought it back, they analyzed it. They just announced the analysis. It has the four amino acids that make up DNA. But most profoundly, they found tryptophan. Tryptophan, when a carbon dioxide comes off of tryptophan, is tryptamine. Think about that. We live in a tryptamine universe. The likelihood now of tryptamines being spread throughout the universe, these are molecules of consciousness. Tryptophan decarboxylizes into tryptamines. It liberates carbon dioxide. So it's only one enzymatic step, and it forms a molecule of consciousness. Now, what this means to me is the universe is conscious. Consciousness exists throughout the universe. So indigenous peoples have been practicing the use of tryptamine-based psychedelics for millennia. And each one of these groups and of indigenous peoples all over the world has had a portal into a multidimensionality of the massive universal consciousness of which we all are a part of which we all are a member. But we live in such a thin slice of reality. And now we have the portals to be able to tap into what I think is universal consciousness. Well, it's a wonderful story. The phrase is two-eyed seeing, and Albert and Moderna Marshall, Eastern Canadian First Nation elders, they came up with this, and they were challenged when an Indigenous mother came in and said, "Why should I indoctrinate my children in the Western educational system? Why should they go to a Western school?" And Albert and Moderna thought very carefully about this, and they came back with an interesting response, what they coined as two-eyed seeing. One eye sees with the knowledge and wisdom of indigenous traditions and the history of elders going back generations. The other eye, in order to survive in these modern times, uses Western technology, Western, and every tradition I maintain, and I think this is true, every tradition has been modified, continues to evolve, and takes advantage of technologies that can make their practices of that tradition more sustainable, to be passed on. So many examples. Obviously, this recording right now, your recording of elders, we are now preserving this for posterity, their wisdom, so their future descendants will have access to their ancestral knowledge. That's an example of two-eyed seeing as Western technology helping indigenous traditions survive. And so I have a new book called Psilocybin Mushrooms in Their Natural Habitat. It's a beautiful book. It covers about 70 species of psilocybin mushrooms used all over the world by at least 10 different cultures. And it's amazing when you see how many cultures have traditional roots in the mycelium, of psilocybin mushrooms. You begin to understand that this is a movement that's been happening across the planet throughout time. And it's such a revolutionary unshackling of the slavery that so many people suffer from dominant governments, religions, etc. It's liberation. We're experiencing a revolution for the freedom of consciousness. Access to these sacraments should be a basic civil right. And this is so important. And one of the things I want to mention is clinically, all clinical studies need to be registered in the United States at clinicaltrials.gov. As of today, there's 263 clinical trials on psilocybin. 263 clinical trials. And the clinical trials that have been published that have gone through phase 3 for depression and anxiety, PTSD, is well established as solid science. It could replace SSRIs, antidepressants, but a much more powerful positive effect with less deleterious influences. Many times people only have one experience, two experiences, or they may do occasionally an experience several years later. But by definition, these are anti-addictive drugs. They've been scheduled in Schedule 1 because they're supposed to qualify for being highly addictive, highly toxic, and a great potential for abuse, and no medical application. Well, psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT doesn't fit any of those categories. It's not addictive. It's not toxic. The LD50 for psilocybin mushrooms is 42 pounds. You'd have to eat 42 pounds of mushrooms, which you could not physically do before it becomes toxic. It's the least toxic drug in mental health ever studied. So phenomenal. It's anti-addictive. When you do the mushrooms, you don't want to do them again for months. So it's not an addictive drug. It's not toxic. It is medically useful. It's addressing medical conditions that other drugs can address. But more importantly, it reduces crime. It reduces violence. It reduces many antisocial behaviors. I believe psilocybin and ayahuasca should be made available for free with education for every person on this planet. Think about how much money would be saved. You wouldn't have people, law enforcement wouldn't be arresting people for something that they're practicing as part of their spiritual belief system. You wouldn't be clogging the courts. You'd be reducing violence. You'd be reducing addiction. The return on investment in making psilocybin, ayahuasca, and dimethyltryptamines and some other drugs legal is massive savings to our economies, to our ecologies, to our ecology of our consciousness. Who can argue against that legitimately? You can take a fraction amount of money, put it into education, have people with therapy, that are leading, have elders showing how to create the containers for safe practices. So, this is not something that is going to spread like cocaine or amphetamines or, opiates that's highly addictive. These are absolutely the antithesis of those drugs. So I think this is an opportunity for us to save, our economies, to reduce warlike behavior, to be better connected to the environment and the ecosystem. We have something here, folks, that's a massive solution across the multiplicity of the social ills that we face today. Well, with any powerful medicine, it's so important that we get this right. And if people just try this willy nilly without being educated, without understanding the importance of set and setting, without having a watcher who makes sure that it's a protected space, to understand the history, the experience, read up on it, talk to others who've been gone through this. Some people have challenging experiences, but they're not really negative experiences. They're things they need to work through. So many people I've met who've had a challenging experience are glad they had that experience because they went through that portal. They sort of went through the birth canal and they've come out the other side and they feel healthier and more whole and they've reconciled some things that were deeply concerning to them. About 70% of the people, according to Johns Hopkins clinical studies with psilocybin, have a uniquely positive experience. So positive, it's been described as the ineffable. They can't describe it. It's so massively significant spiritually to them. So we have to be very careful with these medicines so they are given to people in a respectful and responsible way. So I think that is critically important. Dosage is important. So there's a program called Roots to Thrive, rootstothrive.com. I have no personal investment in it, but they take containers of about 8 people, in this case, led by a fantastic physician, Dr. Pam Crisco, and her other teachers. And they take end of life patients who have been diagnosed typically with cancer, and they're facing the anxiety and depression of they're going to soon die. After this experience they go through, which is very controlled and deliberate on indigenous land, with indigenous elders also cooperating, 80% of the patients who are depressed and scared of dying come out the other side whole and healed and become teachers and therapists to their families. And moreover, the shared experience they have each other to lean upon, to converse with, etc. From my point of view, there's the hero's journey, which is the big high dose ayahuasca. I guess the experiences are the hero's journey. But there's a really sweet spot that we've been calling museum dosing or medium dosing. This is about half a gram to 1.5 grams of psilocybin. And what I think is really exciting for me is that psilocybin creates new neurons. It creates new ways and new neural pathways, literally new ways of thinking. You have more synapses, more ways of being able to think, more creativity. But the museum or medium dose, if you take it just before you go to bed, so you don't have this spectacular hero's journey, but you have this modest bump, well, what's happening when you're sleeping? You're rebuilding new cells. This is why we sleep, is regeneration. So neural regeneration at the time of sleeping, taking a medium dose of psilocybin, your pillow becomes your therapist. You hug your pillow and you sleep. One interesting aspect of psilocybin mushrooms is yawning. And yawning is precedent to sleeping. And if you look up why people yawn, is preparing their bodies physiologically for regeneration by going to sleep. So the fact that this symptom of yawning with psilocybin mushrooms, I think, is predictive that psilocybin could become a neurological vitamin to help people build new neurons, especially we all suffer from age-related neurodegeneration. What if we could be at the peak of our neurological health to the moment we die? We can pass on this knowledge from the elders to the next generation. This is what I think is really, really exciting. And so psilocybin is uniquely positioned to be able to afford that for society, the body intellect of society, the spiritual aspects of society, intergenerational, intercultural, interracial. This is a game changer, and we all can join together and participate in this. I'm super excited about it. Can you tell? I invite all those who are spiritually, intellectually, and medically curious uh, about these psychedelics to come to the ayahuasca forum. I'm attending because of my keen interest in psilocybin, which is a dimethyltryptamine, as is ayahuasca, Banisteriopsis capiae and Psychotria viridis. These also allow tremendously powerful experiences in the tryptamine universe. We all share this together, and I'm so honored to meet other elders who have gone into hyperspace into the tryptamine universe. This is a doorway into a much more powerful realm of consciousness. And moreover, I think it opens up our universal view that indeed we're all just one giant consciousness.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right.
Very much.
Thank you.